Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Power Law Investor. Today is the 19th of March, 2025, a Wednesday. And today we'll be talking about Bitcoin and M2 money supply and trying to predict Bitcoin prices. As a note, this is not financial advice, it's for informational purposes only. And as I'm making this video, Bitcoin is trading a little bit below 83,500 and Caspa is just above 7.5 cents. So, uh, I saw this post posted earlier this week on X by Colin Talks Crypto, and he really showed up this really interesting graph. Basically, what he said was if you take the global M2 money supply and you offset it by 107 days, it matches the Bitcoin price really precisely. And the implication or so what of this is that the M2 money supply has shot up considerably in the last few weeks. And therefore, this suggests that the Bitcoin price could also take off so much. So it gives a measure of timing and it's saying, hey, this might really take off quite a bit. And it was pretty interesting and seemed quite rigorous and well done. And when I dug into it, he had actually got the information from someone called Marek, and I'll leave a link to from Marnell Marek, and I'll leave both these posts, the links to both these posts in the description so you can check it out. And when I saw this, I was really interested because I was thinking like, hey, this is could be great predictive value. And then I dug more into it and I built upon this analysis, which is what I want to share with you guys today, and what sort of caveats we should have in sort of interpreting this data and what my takeaways from this are. So it's great that Colin put this out there and also shared some of the code for generating the M2 money supply so that we can actually test this out and discuss it and build upon it. And so what he's essentially saying is, let's take a look at this. This is the money supply in yellow. If you have the money supply right now aimed like this, and if you move the money supply forward, you lead it by 107 days, we just call it 207, you can see that it overlays the Bitcoin price, those are the candles over here, really well, right? And then the exciting part is, hey, Bitcoin price is about the money supply, M2 global money supply, which is the sum of all the money of basically the amount that the central banks, etc., have, not just in paper form, but in reserves, etc. If this thing takes off, then the Bitcoin price is ready to take off. And so this terrible action that we've been having might be coming to an end pretty soon. And he says, oh, around April 30th might be the time that this happens, right? And he says April 30th is the blast off. And this is not the first time this sort of analysis has been done. Maybe with this sort of timing, it hasn't been done. But there is a link between global money supply and the Bitcoin price, right? And here's some work done by Lynn Alden. I'll also leave a link to her post in the description, is that you can see that as Bitcoin price here on the left-hand side has been associated with an increase in the global M2. So the idea is that the global M2 results in liquidity being pumped into speculative assets, including Bitcoin, and that shoots up over time. But the interesting thing is with her work that Lynn put out there, that the correlation is not constant, right? So with Colin, what he's saying is like, hey, this is following really tightly now. And the caveat is that it doesn't need to keep on following this, and that's why we should be a little careful. And we can look at that in this particular chart over here, that right now the overlap is really good, right, for this period of time. But if we move back, let's say we use this as a starting point, you'll see that the price and the M2 supply are not so tightly correlated. You can just visually see that. And if you take another snapshot and you go further back, this is going down, but this is going up. And then this continues to go up, this continues to go down. So the correlation changes over time. And that's exactly what this graph over here by Lynn shows, that if you take a 12-month window and correlate the M2 money supply with the price of Bitcoin, you can see that sometimes the correlation is really good when it comes to round one, but other times it can be pretty bad. And it can even go negative. So the money supply is going up and the Bitcoin price is going down, or the Bitcoin price is going down, Bitcoin price is going up and money supply is going down, right? But there is an average, right? The average is 0.51 as a correlation. And that's what I would like you, one of the takeaways that I would like you guys to take away from this is yes, this is fantastic correlation now, but we don't know if this correlation is going to last. So we should be careful about making investment decisions solely on the basis of this. And in fact, you can see this in this very data that Colin has put out there, right? Over the last 60 days, the correlation is 91.5%. But over the last 30 days, the correlation is 80%. So the correlation is actually lower for the most recent 30 days than for the last 60 days combined. Right? And so that just gives us an indication that these correlations don't remain constant and may not remain stable. So let's be careful about putting investment decisions in there. However, this did start an interesting line of inquiry for me saying, okay, can we predict what the M2 supply value is going to lead to? What is the Bitcoin price that would work with that, right? And in order to do that, I created this graph, which is taking the log of the Bitcoin price and the log of the M2 price. And the reason we take logs is because we want to deal with stationarity, which is a technical term. It just means that there's a big shift in the baseline, right? Bitcoin price has shot a lot over the many last 15 years. So we want to make sure that we take that into account. Putting it in the log world makes things a little easier for that. And so when you do that, you end up with this blue line trace over here. And then we can draw a line of best fit through that, which happens to have an R squared of 0.865, which is pretty good, which means about 86% of the variation in these values over here is explained by this line over here, right? And so that gives us a fairly strong predictive equation over if we know what the M2 is, then what should the corresponding price of Bitcoin be? And that's exactly what I ended up doing, right? By reverse engineering that and then converting it into the linear domain. You can see here are all the little the points that we had before. You can figure out like, hey, for any given M2, what is our line telling us the price should be, right? And these orange lines are the standard deviations lines, and you can see they're quite extensive. But on average, on trend, if your M2 is 100 trillion, the Bitcoin price should be about 51,000 based on what's happened in the past. If your M2 is 105, it's about 91. And if your M2 is 110, the predicted price should be about 160. So if we go back to our chart over here, and let's look at what the actual value of M2 right now is, and M2 is on the left axis over here, it's 109, right? 109 trillion, which when we plug this into our handy chart over here, tells us that we're looking at a price probably around 150-ish or so, maybe 145, okay? And when you compare that to today's price, which is about 80, then you can see 83, then you can see there's a lot of upside for the Bitcoin over here. So I want to thank Colin and Merrick for sharing their work with us because it's really helps us understand the M2 and Bitcoin correlation in more depth. Uh, and even though the correlation has been fantastic with a 107-day offset, we have to be a little careful in assuming that it's going to follow this. It might. That would be great because we've had such weak price action for a while. But we don't know exactly what that lag is going to be. And even Colin, I think, talks about this, that 75 days is typically what was being used. And he was trying to figure out whether 107 is better than 75 days. And Merrick also talks about that in his post, right? So be careful when we see a graph like this. It might continue to be correlated, but we just don't know. Based on past history, we have some idea that there is a fair bit of variation. So don't put all your eggs in one basket and anticipate this sort of timing is going to work for you. But the important thing that I took away for this, in my interpretation, is hey, that there is this strong correlation between M2 and Bitcoin price. And given where M2 is right now, which is at 109, we should be looking at a much higher Bitcoin price. And so, whatever the timing is before this kicks in, if we look at our graph over here, we're still within the standard deviation range. So there could be a lot of variation. But on trend, we should expect a price of about 148 based on the work that I've done. So I hope this is helpful for you guys. Please comment below if it was useful and any questions that you may have. Like and subscribe and share, and I will catch you on the next one.